Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 21st day of June 2022. I'm meteorologist David Percy. And up first, let's see, June 21st, that's the summer solstice today. And summer began at 1:14 a.m. Alaska Daylight Time. And so tomorrow, Wednesday, that'll be the first full day of summer, and the days will start getting shorter. Nothing noticeable for a while, but definitely the days will start getting warmer as well. And from there, taking a look at hazardous weather graphics, no watches, advisories, warnings out anywhere in the state, including the Panhandle, Gulf of Alaska, Southern Alaska, Bering Sea and Aleutians, all advisory, watch, and warning free again. A couple of systems affecting the northwest part of the state, the Panhandle and the Aleutians, but none of which are strong enough to kick off any warnings or advisories. And fire weather update for Tuesday, June 21st from the Alaska Interagency Coordination Center. More wet thunderstorms for south central and the eastern interior today, and that mostly the upper Madanuska Valley eastward and the eastern Alaska range there and into the 40-mile country southward in toward the North Gulf Coast today in the Panhandle areas, with drier conditions back to the west under high pressure. But southwest winds 15 to 25 miles an hour across the northern interior, and even stronger up along the northwest coastal areas and like around Cape Lisburne, for example. And areas of rain continued in the Panhandle, but that's going to be improving. Showers will be decreasing tomorrow and should end maybe by tomorrow evening across the Panhandle, possibly, hopefully. Definitely be less precipitation there over the next couple of days than what you've seen, and more sunshine as a consequence. And of course the outlook, warming temperatures statewide, a few showers and thunderstorms persisting for the interior and south central, but most areas will be dry. And from there, taking a look at the fire danger chart for today, not too bad really or actually the forecast for tomorrow, June 22nd. Got some extreme back into the Yukon Flats there, and also in the Susitna Valley. Got extreme fire danger showing up once again, but not really too bad there across the lower Yukon, mid-Yukon River Valley, just areas of high fire danger. Northeast Bristol Bay, some high fire danger, and very high in the central interior, and then up into the Yukon Flats area surrounding the extreme fire danger zone. And back into the very high fire danger from the high today for the Kenai Peninsula. Temperatures back 70 to 80 degrees in the afternoon. Pretty dry conditions, a little breezy, but nothing too strong. And of course that increase for the Susitna Valley at highs in the 80 to 85 degree range for Wednesday there. That definitely will boost the fire danger. But off to the east, with all the precipitation that's fallen over the southeast interior, Copper River Basin into the eastern Alaska Range area, pretty low, and that extends down to the Panhandle. And up over the North Slope in the central areas there, you can see a zone that just reached the high category there. That's well, let's see, that's east of Umiat Airfield, but not too bad even up in that area. And satellite imagery showing moisture moving from southwest to northeast across the Bering Sea there, northern Bering Sea. And that bringing some areas of light rain, St. Lawrence Island into the Seward Peninsula, and on up to the Arctic coast there across the western Brooks Range, and circulation off the Panhandle, creating some shower conditions there over the southeast coast, and some of that moisture circulating in from the northeast. You can see the enhancement of the clouds there east of Fairbanks and over toward the border, extending down into the eastern Alaska Range there. Otherwise, mostly sunny skies. The upper Yukon Valley, temperatures in the lower 80s this afternoon. Chukchitsik and Beaver, for example, into the mid to upper 70s, 75 to 80 in the Fairbanks area. Warm temperatures extending down. Susitna Valley, upper 70s to lower 80s here at mid-afternoon. Kenai Peninsula, about the same thing. Definitely most areas well into the 70s, starting to push 80 in some inland areas of the Kenai Peninsula. Quite nice conditions, sunshine, Kodiak Island and Bristol Bay. And you can see out to the southwest frontal system there that'll be advancing northeastward, and the moisture kind of linking up with that band coming down from the southwest there out of the northwest interior areas. That's going to be spreading wind and gale force winds into the western Aleutians and southwest Bering Sea, which will be moving eastward over the next couple of days. And then that low center will kick off to the east and southeast of the Panhandle, so look for a drying trend there with less shower activity and increasing sunshine. Otherwise, today, rain and showers covering most of the southeast coast. One of the heavier amounts, Kivalina, Klawock and Juneau picked up about a tenth of an inch. Hoonah had a half an inch of precipitation. Those are 12-hour amounts. Then the thunderstorm and shower activity up over the southeast interior. Talkeetna into the eastern Alaska Range. Heaviest rainfall amount, thunderstorm must have hit right at Nebezna. They had 1 1/3 inches of rainfall in the last 12 hours. Northway picked up about 1/3 of an inch of precipitation up in that area with lighter amounts off to the east. Drier day today than Fairbanks had yesterday with some scattered shower and thunderstorm activity down the western Alaska Range, but nothing really too widespread with that northwest wind flow coming down, sloping off the Alaska Range there, that allowing temperatures to reach the lower 80s in the western Susitna Valley this afternoon. Maximum sunshine well into the 70s over much of south central Alaska, but only about 60 degrees when you get over toward Eureka and areas eastward with building showers and thunderstorms in that area. Otherwise, weak frontal activity keeping it cloudy and occasionally damp with light amounts of precipitation. Now Kivalina, I'll say Kivalina and Nome both picking up about 1/10 of an inch or so. Kotzebue about 500, so nothing too terribly heavy, but the winds, different story. Cape Lismore and south gusts 51 miles per hour, peak wind gusts there. Point Lay and Teller both seeing 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Also a windy day. You can see kind of a gradient there at the trough over the Yukon, a little bit higher pressure, not much though, but enough of a gradient, Lynn Canal, northern Lynn Canal, to bring a 35-mile-an-hour southerly wind gust to Skagway. Otherwise, high pressure over the southeast Bering centered over the Fox Islands there. Well, not strong enough to keep that system out. It'll tend to slow it down, but it'll advance with gale force winds and rain spreading down Chitka Island tonight. Fair over the interior, some lingering diminishing shower conditions over the eastern Alaska Range, but those will probably continue through the night and into early tomorrow morning to a lesser extent over the Copper River Basin. Showers gradually starting to decrease over the Panhandle. That upper level low now centered over the southern southeast coast, starting to move off to the east and southeast. Clear skies and mild overnight low temperatures here over much of mainland Alaska. It stays generally cloudy, a little breezy, and occasionally wet from the northern Bering Sea up across the Seward Peninsula and into the northwest part of the western Arctic coast, North Slope, and into the western Brooks Range area. And for tomorrow, we'll see that front advances rain eastward to at least Adak, not quite to Atka. Winds on the increase. Could see gale force winds into Adak as winds diminish over Shimmy and Attu, Kiska Island areas. And stays cloudy and damp and cooler up over the northwest part of the state with that southwest flow over the top of the ridge over the Fox Islands there. Now it's going to result in a lot of low clouds and fog becoming more widespread over the Bering Sea and even the eastern Aleutians and into Bristol Bay, with scattered thunderstorms again developing as far south as the Chugach Mountains, maybe into the northern Kenai Peninsula, up into the Talkeetnas, eastern central Alaska Range area. Otherwise, sunny and hot. Highs 75 to 85, south central Alaska, into the Kuskokwim Valley, and up into the Tanana Valley as well. More sun and warmer temperatures in store for the Panhandle. Upper trough keeping the showers lingering over the southern southeast coast, but that changes on Thursday. Look for partly mostly sunny skies, dry temperatures, risk of a thunderstorm up over the Lynn Canal, say Skagway, Haines area, into the Yukon. And chance of thunderstorms, northern Kenai Peninsula, Chugach Mountains, Turnagain Arm, Talkeetnas, and the eastern central Alaska Range. About the same pattern we've seen, except maybe a little bit farther to the southwest. That could result in a little bit cooler temperatures on Thursday, but it may not be anything noticeable. Otherwise sunny and warm. Kodiak Island, western interior, Kuskokwim Valley. A few more clouds out over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, but dry with light winds. And rain and wind into the central Aleutians, not quite making the Fox Islands there. High pressure advances eastward there right along the southwest coast, and rain, drizzle, and fog for the northern part of the state across the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast. Lows tonight, 35 to 45, Arctic coast and North Slope, 40s to mid-50s elsewhere around the state, lower to mid-40s out toward the Bering Sea coast, with lower 40s for the Pribilofs, 40s for the Aleutians, 45 to 50, South Central Alaska, mid-40s Copper River Basin, 45 to 50 in the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, 70 to 83, depending on 70 being in Homer or Seldovia, with 75 to 80 over the inland areas of the Kenai Peninsula, 80 to 85 central southern Susitna Valley, 80 at Talkeetna, and 75 to 80 around the Fairbanks area and into the Yukon Flats again, lower to mid-70s for the northern Kuskokwim Valley, followed by lows, 30s Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather, some marginal VFR along the Arctic coast for the morning Wednesday, and some IFR there for the western Brooks Range along mountains, northwest coast, just north of Kotzebue on up to Cape Lisburne. And then marginal VFR, northern coast of the Seward Peninsula, extends into the Kobuk-Selawik Valley areas. And then back to IFR, southern Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, all the southwest coast, down to the Alaska Peninsula, and the central southern Bering Sea, and central and western Aleutians, all IFR. Fox Islands, marginal VFR. VFR Kodiak Island up into interior Alaska, all the way to most of the North Slope, looking really good. Some marginal VFR possible over the Wrangell Mountains, eastern Alaska Range, and more extensive over the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, marginal VFR central southern southeast coast, otherwise good VFR Kodiak Island right up into the Kuskokwim Valley, Kuskokwim Mountain areas northeastward to the Yukon Flats and up to the eastern Brooks Range. IFR sliding into the central Arctic coast and North Slope, and a widespread area of IFR from the western Brooks Range and the northwest coast down across Norton Sound, northern Bering Sea, just about all of the Bering Sea, and the Aleutians, Unmak and Unalaska Islands, marginal VFR, western Alaska Peninsula, but IFR spreading into the north side of the Alaska Peninsula and into Bristol Bay. And for the morning Thursday, not much change from Wednesday afternoon to Thursday morning out west, except IFR farther inland into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, right up to the Kuskokwim Mountains. Still covering Bristol Bay and most of the Aleutians and Bering Sea, IFR. IFR across the Seward Peninsula into near Selawik, definitely Kotzebue, Kivalina, and Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, Point Lay, marginal VFR, but central eastern Arctic coast, eastern North Slope, IFR. And then south of the Brooks Range, pretty good conditions. You can see VFR right on down into the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, Lincoln Isle Glacier Bay VFR, but the remainder of the southeast coast marginal. And then that pulls back off the coast, or too near the coastline, but looks like Port Alexander and Sitka on up to Elfin Cove, Yakutat to Cape St. Elias, marginal VFR, otherwise IFR, east and north. Marginal VFR, central Brooks Range, North Slope, IFR in the Arctic coast. IFR covering the Bering Sea again and the Aleutians, cutting off about Unalaska Island, Unalaska Island marginal, western Alaska Peninsula areas, and the marginal or the IFR right along the southwest coast, southern Seward Peninsula, passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR for Wednesday. Adigan, same forecast, both occasional marginal VFR at times, and Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. Good VFR for rainy and VFR for windy. Isabel, VFR in the forecast. Mintasta, also VFR. Tanita, VFR. And Portage, VFR flying conditions, both sides. And for Chilkoot and White, starting out marginal, becoming VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet with that cold upper low right over the Panhandle there. Otherwise, 8 to 10,000 feet central and southern Bering Sea, northern Bering about 6,000 feet, and that covers the western Arctic coast and northwest coastal areas. Icing, 6 to 13,000 feet with the moisture and system sliding into the northwest part of the state. of rime, isolated moderate rime, mixed icing over the panhandle, 7 to 14,000 feet, and widespread area of isolated moderate rime icing there out over the Aleutians in the southwest Bering Sea. Jet stream westerly flow across the northern Bering kind of turns northwest as it approaches the coast and then turns back to west and then southwest over the north central interior, all 60 to 70 knots on the speeds there. Northeast 30 knots, southern Prince William Sound, about 50 knots east side of Kodiak Island, and then southwest 90 knots with that system pulling into the western Aleutians, and 70 knots out of the northeast over the panhandle. Northerlies 45 knots, southern southeast coast. Otherwise, 25 to 40 knot winds from the west and southwest from the Bering Sea up into the north and northwest interior. Southerlies 30 to 40 knots, western Bering Sea and the Aleutians. 40 to 45 knot southerly winds there for the central Aleutians. West-southwest 40 knots, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula area. Light and variable elsewhere. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop, northwest coast, Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island, as well as the central and western Aleutians to Kiska Island.
So the sun, looking here from the ground, seems very constant and quiet. But actually, when we look at it from space, we can see it's quite turbulent and active. Space weather is activity on the sun and in the near-Earth space that can affect our technological infrastructure and society. The sun is constantly spewing out a stream of particles called the solar wind that goes out into the solar system. And it affects us here near Earth, where we're protected by a magnetic field. The interaction between the solar wind and the magnetic field can cause space weather. The Carrington event is the largest storm we've seen in recorded history when we're looking at space weather. But every solar cycle, which repeats about every 11 years, one estimate estimates that there's a 10% chance of getting a large storm like the Carrington event that could impact us here on Earth. But we see solar storms almost all the time. And these storms have an effect on our technological infrastructure. Solar storms can cause activity in Earth's atmosphere and magnetosphere that can damage electrical power grids that power our communities, interrupt radio and satellite communications, and can cause our GPS navigation to fail. NOAA is working with its international partners to ensure that we have different vantage points where we can observe space weather. Our space weather observing infrastructure from space includes the NOAA Discover satellite and the NASA ACE satellite that are stationed upstream of Earth to give us a first buoy measurement of the solar wind. It also includes the ESA-NASA SOHO satellite and the NASA Stereo satellite that image the sun and also make coronagraph measurements of the outer atmosphere of the sun, the corona, that can tell us when large explosions happen off the sun. We also observe the sun and the Earth's magnetic field from the geostationary location with NOAA's GOES. So the way we use the space weather information from satellites and from the ground is to be able to make forecasts and predictions, just like we do with hurricanes and terrestrial weather. We observe the sun and look for activity and see how it develops, and see if it's going to culminate into a large explosion that can affect us here on Earth. NOAA is working with its international partners to expand our observing capability. We're committed to observing along the sun-Earth line. So we're going to do the imaging of the sun and the upstream buoy measurements of the solar wind along the sun-Earth axis. The more we understand about the sun, the more we can prepare for it and become, just like we are a weather-ready nation, become a space weather-ready nation. And as we look forward to humans exploring out into the solar system and advancing our space commerce activities, space weather becomes more and more important.
Here at the Space Weather Prediction Center, we monitor space activity as it's occurring back at the sun, and then we issue out a forecast as well as alerts, watches, and warnings as activity is occurring. A typical space weather event would start with a solar flare back at the sun. That solar flare is short-lived and produces fairly short-lived impacts as well, basically impacting communications on the daylit side of the Earth. However, some solar flares are also associated with a coronal mass ejection, or an eruption of plasma that's blasted off the sun and out into space. As forecasters, it's our job to determine if that cloud of plasma is moving towards Earth, and if it comes towards Earth, what the potential impacts may be. Those impacts can range from a fairly low-level storm that may produce the aurora a little bit farther south than usual, or can range up into fairly significant magnetic disturbances that don't happen very often, but when they do, they can impact technologies and infrastructure here on Earth. We provide information to lots of different user groups, from airlines to the electric power grid, to emergency managers, aviation, satellite community, lots of different customers.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Moving on to the marine forecast. Coastal water forecast for the central and south coast looking pretty good tomorrow. Northwest breeze at 15 knots, seas 5 feet. For the north coast, west and northwest winds 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. Lincoln Isle Glacier Bay, northern inner channel, south winds at about 20 knots, maybe a few higher gusts. Otherwise, Passage Canal, north winds 15 knots, and Clarence Strait, northwest winds at 15 knots. And then for the day Thursday, northern inner channels, pretty light winds out of the southeast predominantly at about 10 knots with seas down to 2 feet. Stevens Passage, south winds 15 knots, 2 foot seas, and Clarence Strait, northwest winds at 15 knots. And for the central and south coast, winds will be out of the northwest at 15 knots with 4 to 6 foot seas. North coast, winds west, 10 knots, seas 3 feet. Prince William Sound, west winds 10 knots. Cook Inlet, west to southwest winds at 10 knots. And small craft advisories are Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands with northwest winds 25 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas. Otherwise, light variable wind conditions in the forecast for the North Gulf Coast on Wednesday. Seas only 3 feet. And for Thursday, Cook Inlet, light northwest winds at 10 knots with slight seas. Small craft advisories continue for Kamishak Bay. Northwest winds become west, sustained at 25 knots. Barren Islands, north winds at 25 knots. For the North Gulf Coast, winds will be variable at 10 knots with 3 foot seas. Look for variable winds at 10 knots for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, southwest to northwest winds 20 to 25 knots on Wednesday. And for the Alaska Peninsula, north to northwest winds 15 knots, seas running 3 to 4 feet. And Bristol Bay looking at west winds at 20 knots with 4 foot seas. And for Thursday, for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, look for northeast winds at 15 knots. And from Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, look for northwest winds at 15 knots. Castle Cape to Sitkinak, winds will be northwest at 20 knots. Kodiak Island, west winds 15 to 20 knots, seas just 3 to 4 feet. On Alaska Island, light variable winds for Wednesday with seas 2 to 3 feet, wind speeds at about 10 knots. Unimak Island, though, southeast winds coming up to 20 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas. Small craft advisories for Adak and Atka. Southeast winds increasing 25 to 30 knots with 6 to 10 foot seas. And gale warnings for Amchitka Island for southeast winds 35 knots with 14 foot seas. Kiska to Shimia, winds southeast 30 knots, seas 13 feet. And for Thursday, from Shemya to Kiska, east winds 20 knots with 8-foot seas, and southeast winds 30 knots from Amchitka Island. Gale warnings for Adak, Atka, and Nunavak Island for southeast winds 30 to 40 knots, seas running 12 to 17 feet. And for Unalaska Island, look for south to southeast winds at 20 to 25 knots. And for the southwest coast, look for west-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots on Wednesday, south winds 20 knots for the Pribilofs, southwest winds 20 knots for St. Matthew Island, Norton Sound, and St. Lawrence Island, seas 4 to 6 feet. For Thursday, for St. Lawrence Island, southwest winds 20 knots, south winds 20 knots for the Yukon Delta coast, west 15 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, small craft advisories for the Pribilof Islands and St. Matthew Island, southeast winds 25 to 30 knots. And up on the Beaufort Sea coast, on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, south to southwest winds at 15 knots. Southwest winds 15 knots for the central and western Arctic coast, seas in the ice-free waters to 4 feet. And 20 knot southerly winds from Cape Lisburne to Point Hope, and from Cape Thompson to Wales, small craft advisories for south winds at 25 knots. And for Thursday, small craft advisories from Wales to Cape Beaufort, south winds 25 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet. And small craft advisories for the western Arctic coast, south winds 25 knots, central coast south at 15, light southerly winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast at 10 knots. And for tonight, look for showers, low clouds, fog, rain, and drizzle with a series of troughs up over the Arctic coast, western North Slope, and down into the northern Bering Sea. Stronger system brings gale force winds and rain into the western Aleutians to Amchitka Island. High pressure keeps winds light and variable over the eastern and central Aleutians, Bristol Bay, as well as interior Alaska. Showers will be decreasing over the southeast coast. And for tomorrow, scattered isolated showers for the Panhandle with partly sunny skies. Otherwise, gale force winds into the central Aleutians, and that moves to the eastern Aleutians on Thursday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.